Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into the flickering lamplight of ancient Egypt, where the air smells like sandalwood and a hint of sweat, and the only thing sharper than a barber's razor is the suspicion hanging in the air. You walk through narrow streets, sand crunching under your sandals, and pass vendors hawking figs and pottery. A hawk circles overhead and a few kids dart past you, giggling, barefoot in the dusk. The Nile glistens nearby, dark and slow, as if it knows secrets you never will. You round a corner, and there it is, a barber shop, if you can even call it that. It's more like an open-air stall, shaded by linen cloths, where a man in a simple white kilt sharpens a gleaming copper razor. You pause, watching the flick of his wrist, and wonder how many necks that blade has kissed. A low murmur of voices drifts from the stall customers whispering, sharing half-truths and probably more than a few bad jokes about the pharaoh's latest hairpiece. The barber glances up, and for a second you swear he's staring right through you. His right hand holds the razor, but his left, well, it's tucked behind his back as if the very sight of it might offend the gods. You shift uncomfortably. Superstition runs deep here, deeper than the Nile's black silt. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop a comment with your location and local time. Where in the world are you listening from? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step into the barber's world, and instantly the heat and buzz of the market fade away. The barber's tools gleam in the fading sun, copper razors, bone-handled shears, a tiny pot of what might be perfumed oil or, more likely, some kind of dubious crocodile fat. The smells here are a strange mix: sharp metal, warm sweat, a faint hint of myrrh. And let's not forget the whisper of roasted goat from the vendor across the way, because, of course, someone's always grilling something nearby. The barber's clients sit quietly, heads tilted, necks exposed like offerings. You notice their expressions, nervous, maybe, or just resigned. The ritual of the shave here is serious business. A slip of the blade could mean more than a nick. It could mean a curse, an omen, or worse. The barber moves smoothly, a man in control of his art always, with the right hand, not always. His left hand rests like a forgotten thing, barely moving except to grip a jar or brush. Historians still argue whether this fear of the left hand was purely superstition or tied to practical dangers. After all, in a world without antiseptics, a slip from an unskilled lefty could mean infection, fever, and a slow, painful death. You probably wouldn't survive this kind of shave if your barber were careless or, heaven forbid, left-handed. A few customers glance your way, and you imagine their thoughts. Who is this stranger? Why are you watching the barber so closely? And are you judging the man's technique or waiting to see if he drops the blade with his left? Your eyes drift to the Nile again. The river glimmers, dark and wide, and in the distance a temple rises like a shadow. The connection between the barbers and the temples is closer than you think, but we'll get to that soon. The left hand, that hand, is not just an inconvenience here. It's a thing to be hidden, controlled, feared. The sun dips lower, and the scent of the river shifts, blending with the earthy tang of the barber shop. You hear a quiet chant from somewhere nearby, the sound of prayer, or perhaps just a lullaby for the gods. And as the last customer rises from the barber's chair, freshly shaven and dusted with what might be ground-up lotus petals, you wonder, what would it feel like to sit in that chair, to trust your throat to a man bound by ritual, by fear, by the weight of tradition? The night creeps in, slow and steady, and you pull your shawl a little tighter, imagining the sound of the copper blade gliding across skin, the scent of old oils, and the ever-present hum of a world that still fears the power of a left hand. You stand quietly at the edge of the barber shop, the shadows lengthening as the sun slides lower. The air is thick with the scent of river mud, sweat, and a faint sharpness that might be the copper of the razors, or maybe just the crackle of nerves. A fly buzzes lazily past your ear, and you catch a glimpse of the Nile's dark water just beyond the reed-lined bank. The scene before you shifts almost imperceptibly as you notice the small shrine-like structure nestled beside the barber's stall. It's not much to look at, just a squat little alcove carved into the wall, draped with a faded cloth. A clay figurine rests inside, its features worn smooth by time and dust. The barber glances at it every so often, like it's a silent co-worker. You realize this isn't just a place for a quick shave. Here, barbers operate in a space that's half shop, half temple. It's a sacred spot where blades glint under the watchful gaze of gods who don't care much for left hands. Barbers in ancient Egypt weren't just the guys trimming beards and complaining about the weather. They held a strange kind of power. Many worked right next to temples, performing purification rituals alongside their more obvious duties. Shaving wasn't just about looking neat. It was about spiritual cleanliness. You can almost hear the priestly chants echoing from the temple, mixing with the snip of scissors. The barber runs his right hand gently across the customer's scalp, murmuring words that you can't quite catch. There's a deliberate rhythm to it, a sense of ritual you didn't expect. He's not just cutting hair, he's performing a small, everyday kind of magic, using his blades to keep chaos at bay. You glance at the little shrine again and feel the weight of it. Hair in ancient Egypt wasn't just hair. It was tied to purity, power, and the delicate balance between order and disorder, between the known world and the lurking unknown. There's something else that catches your eye. A tiny jar, half hidden behind a wooden comb, is filled with what looks like powdered crocodile fat? Maybe. Or it could be natron, or a ground-up herb that's supposed to ward off evil. Historians still argue whether these ingredients were based on genuine medicinal knowledge, or if they were just elaborate placebos. Crocodile fat, in particular, has been linked to healing and warding off spirits, but it's also a bit off-putting, right? You imagine slathering it on your skin and shiver. The barber's chair itself is simple, just a low wooden stool with grooves, worn deep by years of customers shifting nervously in place. But what makes it strange is its placement, right next to the temple's outer wall, almost as if the barber wanted the gods themselves to witness every snip and scrape. You picture a priest, freshly shaved, stepping into the temple with a head gleaming like polished stone, while the barber mutters a quiet prayer to keep the bad luck at bay. The connection between barbers and temples wasn't just symbolic either. Some barbers were technically temple staff, performing purification shaves for priests and even for the statues of gods. The logic was simple. Gods couldn't abide impurity, And what was more impure than unshorn hair in the desert heat? You imagine the barber kneeling before a massive statue of Osiris, carefully scraping the stone chin clean with a copper blade, right hand steady, left hand hidden away like a guilty secret. You hear a low laugh from the stall. A customer makes a joke about someone's crooked beard, and the barber's chuckle is dry, almost weary. There's an edge to it, though. You get the sense that a barber's life wasn't exactly easy. Imagine standing all day in the dusty heat, listening to every complaint and secret, and knowing that one slip of the razor, one careless left-handed stroke, could bring down curses or whispers of bad luck. You wonder how many barbers secretly practice their left-hand skills in private, just in case. The breeze picks up, rustling the edges of the linen canopy, and the scent of roasting onions wafts in from a nearby cookshop. The Nile hums softly, and for a moment everything seems suspended. The blade, the breath, the shared knowledge that this simple act of grooming is laced with meaning. You feel a strange reverence for the barbers, these quiet men in white kilts who keep chaos trimmed and the gods appeased, one careful right-handed stroke at a time. The night deepens, and you lean in closer, noticing how the barber's fingers curl tight around his tools. It's subtle, but it's there, his right hand firm and confident, his left tucked almost awkwardly at his side, like an actor waiting off stage. The left, in this place and time, is more than just a hand. It's a symbol, a warning, a thing to be watched. You start to wonder, where did this fear of the left hand even come from? Why did it matter so much to these ancient Egyptians? The answer, like so many things in history, is a swirl of superstition, practicality, and a pinch of mystery. The Egyptians believed in Mat, the balance between order and chaos, life and death, purity and impurity. The right side was order, the left chaos. The right hand was associated with life-giving acts, eating, blessing, healing. The left, that was the hand you used for unclean tasks, like wiping after the toilet. Yeah, that hand. You glance back at the barber, who continues his careful work, blade flashing under the dim light, and you can't help but think, if you were left-handed in this world, you were already at a disadvantage. To use your left hand for something like shaving, especially near the sacred head, would have been seen as, well, unclean at best, a straight-up offense to the gods at worst. Historians still argue whether this taboo came directly from religious doctrine or whether it evolved over time, spreading like a persistent bad smell in the humid air of the Nile Delta. Some scholars point out that the left hand was also associated with the sinister. The Latin word sinistra means left, but also unlucky or evil. Sure, that's Ramang, not Egyptian, but there's a fascinating overlap in how cultures around the world treated lefties, like shadowy figures lurking just out of sight. You imagine a barber in ancient Thebes, trembling slightly as he catches himself reaching for the razor with the wrong hand. What did he do then? Hide it? Laugh it off? Or quietly say a prayer and hope the gods weren't watching too closely? There's also the practical side of things. Most tools, from razors to chisels, were designed for right-hand use. Trying to wield a copper blade in your left hand might have been more dangerous than defying a superstition. If you've ever tried to slice a bagel with your non-dominant hand, you get the picture, except here the stakes were a bit higher. One slip and the consequences weren't just a ruined sandwich. they could be a bloody mess, an infection, or whispers that the gods were angry. You watch the barber's movements, the careful way he switches tools, always with the right, never the left. It's a little hypnotic, like watching a musician tuning an instrument. You wonder how many barbers secretly struggled, their left-handed instincts pushing against cultural norms. Did they train themselves out of it, forcing their bodies to conform to the expectations of the day? Or did some rebel in private, practicing in secret, knowing they could never reveal it publicly without risking their reputation or worse? The left hand, you realize, was more than just an inconvenience. It was a marker, a stigma that followed you through life. A left-handed barber wasn't just a curiosity, he was a potential threat. A man who might bring bad luck to his clients, or worse, offend the gods by his very touch. The breeze shifts, and you hear the low rumble of drums from the temple courtyard, a reminder that the gods are always listening. The barber's hand hesitates for a second, just a flicker, and you feel a shiver of tension. Did his hand cramp? Did he almost, for just a heartbeat, switch to the left? The customer doesn't seem to notice, lost in his own thoughts, but you can almost hear the collective breath of the shop holding steady, waiting for the moment to pass. As the blade slides smoothly across the man's cheek, leaving a gleaming path of bare skin, you sense the weight of tradition pressing down on this place. The left hand, the unclean hand, the one that must be hidden and restrained, is a quiet presence in the room, a shadow in the corner, a whisper you can't quite shake. You glance again at the little shrine, the flicker of the oil lamp, and wonder, was it all just superstition? Or did they know something we've forgotten, some truth about balance and chaos that we ignore at our peril? The night deepens, and a scent of incense mingles with the soft rustle of linen robes. You feel the ancient world settling around you, a place where a hand was never just a hand, and where every blade, every cut, carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken rules. The barber's tools catch the faint gleam of the moonlight, and you realize there's more to them just a simple blade and comb. Your gaze drifts over the spread on the low wooden shelf copper razors, etched with tiny symbols, combs carved from bone, and a small jar filled with what looks like ground herbs or crushed minerals. But the thing that makes you pause is the amulet hanging from a thin leather cord, looped over the handle of the barber's razor. It's small, maybe the size of your thumb, but it radiates an air of quiet importance like a secret weapon tucked into plain sight. You inch closer, pretending to adjust your shawl, and catch a glimpse of the amulet's design, an eye, a swirl, and what might be a crocodile or a coiled snake. It's a mash-up of protective symbols, designed to ward off misfortune and, more importantly, to keep the barber's hand steady. You can't help but wonder, was that for the barber's protection or the customer's? Historians still argue whether these amulets were standard barber tools or if they were a personal touch, a way for each barber to carve out a little bit of magical insurance in an unpredictable world. You imagine a barber in Thebes whispering a quick charm before each shave, hoping the gods would keep his wrist steady and his customer's throat intact. After all, there wasn't much room for error in this business. Then there's the jar of what you now realize is probably crocodile fat. Yep, actual crocodile fat. It sounds like something out of a bad TikTok skincare trend, but in ancient Egypt, it was believed to have protective and healing properties. Some thought it warded off evil spirits. Others believed it could ease razor burn or even prevent infections. There's even a theory, one of those half-forgotten whispers of history, that crocodile fat mixed with herbs could act as a charm against curses. You imagine the barber smearing it across a customer's scalp, the thick, greasy smell mixing with the scent of sweat and old copper, and you try not to wrinkle your nose too much. The toolkit also includes a small curved blade, almost like a tiny sickle, that looks too delicate for shaving. You realize it's used for trimming nails, another essential part of purification rituals. Clean hair, clean nails, clean soul. Everything in balance, everything orderly, and always, always with the right hand. You can almost hear the whispers of customers. Did you see that barber? He used his left hand to hold the oil jar. Is that bad luck? The social rules here are as sharp as the blades themselves. And then there's the charm bag, tucked at the back of the shelf. It's just a small leather pouch, tied tight with a scrap of linen. What's inside? Bits of herbs, maybe thyme, myrrh, or frankincense. Or perhaps something weirder, like a scrap of papyrus with a spell scrawled on it in ink that's half faded. You imagine the barber muttering a protective phrase under his breath before opening the bag, the words curling around the room like invisible smoke. Was it real protection or just the power of belief? You'll never know for sure, and honestly, neither did they. A sharp crack startles you, a clay pot breaking nearby, a vendor cursing under his breath. The barber doesn't flinch. His eyes are focused, his hands steady. He dips the razor into a small pot of oil, watching the thin sheen spread across the blade, and you notice how carefully he moves. Every motion is practiced, almost ritualistic. You can see it in the way he adjusts the angle of the blade, the way he tests its sharpness with a soft brush of his thumb, always the right thumb, never the left. You wonder what it must have felt like to hold that blade every day, knowing that it wasn't just a tool but a kind of responsibility. The customers here aren't just getting a haircut, they're getting a moment of spiritual purification, a ritual that cleanses them in the eyes of the gods. You glance at the amulet again, the glint of copper, the faint scent of herbs, and feel a shiver run down your spine. There's more going on here than just hair and beards. The breeze shifts again, carrying the scent of date wine and roasting fish. The market's winding down, the chatter softening into the low hum of evening. The barber wipes his blade clean with a strip of cloth, tucks the amulet close to his chest, and mutters something you can't quite catch. A blessing, maybe dot, or a prayer for the next customer, whoever that might be. You feel the air change, the weight of history pressing in, and you know one thing for sure. This isn't just a haircut. It's a dance with the sacred, a careful balancing act between sharp blades, ancient fears, and the silent gaze of the gods. The barber's hand, slick with a thin sheen of oil, glides over the man's scalp in slow, careful circles, a rhythm as familiar as the flow of the Nile itself. The customer closes his eyes, breathing slow, his lips barely parting with each exhale, as if surrendering to the blade, the ritual, and the moment. But as you watch, something shifts in the air. It's not just the hair being removed, it's something deeper. The barber doesn't just cut hair. He's also a healer of sorts, a caretaker of small, everyday ailments. You glance down at the dusty floor, where a small bowl of herbs sits next to a collection of thin bronze needles, twisted wire, and what looks suspiciously like a tooth, freshly yanked and gleaming with a smudge of red. Your stomach flips. Barbers in ancient Egypt weren't just here for trims and shaves. They were also the people you visited when your tooth ached, your skin festered, or that suspicious lump behind your ear started to turn purple. You can almost hear the groan of a man with a raging toothache, gripping the sides of the stool, and the barber steady, calm reaching for the bronze hook, ready to extract the offending molar. No anesthetic, no antiseptic, just a prayer to the gods and a hope that the infection wouldn't spread. Historians still argue whether barbers learned their healing skills through formal training, through temple connections, or just by sheer grisly experience. Some think barbers were considered a kind of poor man's physician, filling in the gaps when no proper healer was available. And it wasn't just teeth. Boils, infected cuts, rashes. Barbers were often called upon to lance and clean wounds, applying a mash of herbs, honey, or even crushed insects to stop the bleeding. The logic was simple. They already had the tools, sharp blades, a steady hand, and an understanding of the body's surfaces. You picture the barber's toolkit, the gleaming razors beside pots of myrrh and linen strips, a strange blend of beauty and brutality. The customer's head tilts back, exposing his throat, and the barber's fingers pause, almost imperceptibly, before gliding the blade along the skin. You think back to the tooth extraction, the way a barber might have had to straddle a patient, gripping their jaw, twisting the stubborn molar loose with a thin, hooked implement, the tension snapping in the air as the tooth came free with a sickening crunch. You shudder. Imagine coming in for a beard trim and leaving with one less tooth. And yet, in a world without antibiotics or sterile gauze, this was survival. The barber's stall wasn't just a place to get cleaned up for the gods or the market. It was a place where pain was managed, where infections were cut away, where wounds were dressed, and where, if the gods were kind, you walked away a little lighter, a little less burdened by the aches of your body. You notice a small clay jar labeled with a faded symbol, an ointment, perhaps, or a rudimentary salve. Maybe it's made from frankincense or a resin, or maybe it's that delightful mix of crocodile fat and ground-up herbs again. The smell is sharp, almost medicinal, and you imagine it being smeared on a newly lanced boil, the barber whispering a half-remembered prayer as he works. It's a strange combination, isn't it? A man trusted with both your beard and your boils, with your vanity and your health. The customer opens his eyes, sighs, and nods in quiet thanks, as if grateful not just for the smoothness of his skin, but for the absence of pain. You catch the briefest flash of a smile, just a flicker, and wonder how many times that man has come to this barber for more than just a trim. The night air cools, and the scent of burning oil drifts on the breeze. You glance at the low shelf of tools, again the razor, the hook, the amulet, the jar, and it strikes you that each object is more than it seems. The barber's world is a careful blend of beauty, health, and ritual. Each cut of the blade a quiet prayer that the gods will grant a clean shave and no bad luck. The drum beat from the temple grows louder, a slow, steady thrum that seems to echo the barber's own rhythm, the scrape of the blade, the press of fingers, the soft exhale of a customer who walks away lighter, healed in small ways no one will ever fully understand. The drum beats from the temple fade into the night, but their quiet pulse lingers in the air as you watch the next man settle into the barber's low stool. His robes rustle, and his beard gleams in the moonlight long, carefully curled and dusted with what might be perfumed oil or powdered lotus petals. The barber pauses for a moment, studying the shape of the beard, as if it holds the secrets of the man's soul. And maybe it does, because in this world, a beard isn't just hair, it's power. You glance around, noticing how the other men in the shop seem to watch each other out of the corners of their eyes. Some are clean-shaven, their chins bare and smooth as polished alabaster, while others sport short, neatly trimmed beards, each one a statement. But the man in the chair, his beard is long, pointed, and elaborately styled, a miniature monument to status. You can almost hear the whispers. He must be important, maybe a priest, maybe even someone close to the pharaoh. The barber reaches for a comb carved from bone, running it slowly through the beard's tight curls, and you realize this isn't just a grooming session, it's a ritual. In ancient Egypt, beards were a symbol of authority, especially the false beards worn by pharaohs during ceremonies. Even female pharaohs like Hatshepsut sometimes wore ceremonial beards, a way to project power and legitimacy. It's strange, isn't it? A woman donning a fake beard to command respect, though. Let's be honest, some modern politicians could probably use that trick. The barber begins to trim, his copper blade flashing in the lamplight, shaping the beard into a sharp tapering point. You hear a soft sigh from the customer, the tension draining from his shoulders as the blade moves with expert precision. It's almost like a performance, the barber's right hand conducting a symphony of snips and swipes, the left still awkwardly at his side. Always the right, always. Historians still argue whether beard shapes were strictly tied to social class, or if they were more about personal preference. But one thing's clear, the longer and more elaborate the beard, the more powerful the man. You imagine a priest stepping into the temple, his beard oiled and shining, the gods watching with what you hope is approval. And then you picture a man like the one in the chair, important, but maybe not that important, getting a trim before an audience with the pharaoh, hoping his perfectly shaped beard would earn him a little more favor, a little more authority. There's also the hidden fear in all this. A poorly trimmed beard could be a disaster. An unbalanced shape might suggest weakness or disrespect. Worse, an accidental nick from the blade could be seen as an omen. A bad cut could ripple outward like a stone thrown into the Nile. Did the barber's hand slip? Was it a careless mistake or a sign from the gods? You imagine the tension in the air, the half-glances exchanged between customer and barber, the quiet prayers muttered under breath. The customer in the chair tilts his head slightly, and the barber dabs a bit of oil onto the beard, smoothing it down with careful fingers. The scent of myrrh rises, sweet and sharp, mixing with the copper tang of the blade. You wonder how many stories have been whispered in this space, how many deals struck, how many secrets shared while the barber's blade glides across skin and hair, shaping not just appearances, but reputations. The beard, you realize, is more than vanity. It's a badge of power, a symbol of connection to the divine, a marker of status in a world where the gods watched everything. And here, in this dim little stall beside the temple wall, the barber is the keeper of that power, the one who decides whether a man's face reflects strength or weakness. The customer rises, beard gleaming in the lamplight, and you swear he walks a little taller, a little more assured, as if the shape of his beard might sway the gods themselves. You glance at the barber, who quietly wipes his blade and reaches for the next tool, his eyes already scanning the next man's face, searching for the perfect lines. You wonder how many rulers, priests, and merchants have sat in that same chair, placing their trust and their pride in the hands of a man who must never, ever use his left hand. The night air hums softly, the sounds of the market fading into the darkness, and you feel the weight of it all, the hair, the blades, the whispered fears. It's more than just a trim. It's a careful dance with power, risk, and the gods themselves. The moonlight creeps lower on the horizon, casting long, thin shadows across the sand. You find yourself staring at the walls of a nearby tomb, where faded figures stretch across the stone, frozen in their painted poses. The lines are precise, some figures standing tall, others seated, holding offerings, all in profile. You step closer, squinting at the details, and there it is, a small, almost unnoticed figure near the edge of the mural. A man holding a razor. And wait, he's using his left hand. Your heart skips just a little. It's subtle, but it's there. The angle of the wrist, the position of the fingers, it's unmistakable. Someone, long ago, painted a left-handed barber. You blink, wondering if it's a mistake, or a quiet rebellion, or just a forgotten detail no one else bothered to correct. Historians still argue whether this kind of depiction was a fluke or a coded message, a hint that left-handedness wasn't always seen as taboo. Some point to a handful of artifacts, tiny sculptures, rare inscriptions that show left-handed figures, but they're rare, almost like ghostly echoes in a world that wanted to pretend lefties didn't exist. You wonder if the artist who painted this scene knew someone, a cousin, a friend, maybe even a barber who worked quietly with their left hand, hoping no one noticed. The figures around the left-handed barber look tense, their eyes a little too wide, their postures stiff. You can almost hear the whispered warnings. Don't let the left hand touch you. It brings bad luck. It brings bad luck. And yet, there he is, razor in hand, doing his work as if the gods themselves have turned a blind eye, at least for now. You feel the dry grit of the tomb wall beneath your fingertips, the faint scent of old stone and dust rising with each breath. It's easy to forget in this moment that these walls were painted thousands of years ago, by hands as real and tired and hopeful as yours. You picture the artist, brush in hand, mixing pigment in a clay bowl, trying to get the angle of the barber's wrist just right. Did they hesitate, thinking, wait, should I switch it to the right? Or did they leave it as it was, a quiet, stubborn flick of the wrist against the tide of superstition? The barber you watched earlier moves into your mind's eye, his left hand tucked safely away, his right hand sharp and practiced. And yet, maybe somewhere in Egypt, there was a left-handed barber working in secret, hoping no one would notice the wrong hand on the razor. The thought makes you shiver. How many moments of quiet rebellion have been lost to time? You glance back at the tomb painting, tracing the outlines of the barber's figure. The blade he holds is small but unmistakable, a crescent of copper that gleams faintly, even in the dim torchlight. Around him, customers recline on low stools, heads tilted, eyes half closed, an almost universal pose, unchanged through the centuries. You can almost hear the low murmur of conversation, the quiet scrape of the blade, the rustle of linen robes. The scene feels so close, as if you could step into it, feel the stone underfoot, the heat on your skin. And yet the left-handed figure is an anomaly, a strange little ripple in the smooth surface of time. You wonder if the painter got in trouble for it, or if anyone even noticed. Maybe it was just a slip, a mistake made at the end of a long day under the beating sun. Or maybe, just maybe, it was intentional, a tiny act of defiance hidden in plain sight, a reminder that no matter how strong the rules, someone always breaks them, even if only with a single brush stroke. The tomb's silence wraps around you like a blanket, the echoes of ancient whispers drifting in the still air. The moon shifts, casting a pale light over the walls, and for a moment you almost think you see the figures move, the barber's hand lifting, the customer's breathing, the blade catching the faintest glint of starlight. The moment passes, and everything is still again. But you know what you saw. The left hand, the forbidden hand, etched quietly into the wall, a reminder that even in the strictest times, someone somewhere dared to break the rules. The scent of dust and old resin clings to your skin as you step away from the tomb's shadow, but your mind stays tangled in that quiet detail, the left-handed barber. Frozen in pigment, a tiny rebellion that feels both dangerous and absurd. You glance back at the bustling barber shop, where the copper razors glint like small, waiting moons. The barber's next customer settles into the stool, a wiry man with deep lines etched into his face. He tilts his head back, throat bared, and the barber picks up the blade, right hand steady, left hand hidden like a shameful secret. And yet, even with all the caution, all the quiet prayers, accidents happen. You shiver slightly as you hear the faintest snick of the blade just a little too close, a whisper of skin breaking under copper. The customer tenses, eyes snapping open, a flicker of fear darting across his face. The barber's hands freeze for a heartbeat, and you can feel it, so can the customers watching from the edges, the weight of that moment hanging in the air. There's a superstition here, whispered in low tones after the lamps dim, that a cut from a barber's blade, especially if it's done by a left-handed slip, could carry a curse. Not a wound, not an infection, but something worse. A lingering, invisible bad luck that could seep into your bones, your family, your crops. You remember that crocodile fat from earlier, how it was sometimes mixed with herbs to ward off bad omens. Now you wonder if it wasn't just for healing cuts, but for canceling curses too. Historians still argue whether this belief in the razor's curse was rooted in medical fear after all. Without modern antibiotics, a small cut could mean a slow, agonizing death, or whether it was more about the spiritual weight of a blade passing too close to the breath of life. Maybe both. You picture a man going home after a shave, touching the tiny nick on his neck, and feeling a sudden dread. Was it just a slip, or a sign from the gods that something was coming? The barber moves quickly now, pressing a linen cloth to the man's neck, dabbing the blood, whispering a soft, urgent prayer. You catch the glint of the amulet swinging gently from the razor's handle, the charms dancing in the air like they, too, are trying to ward off bad luck. The customer leans back, eyes half shut, but you can tell he's tense, gripping the stool's edges as if the wood itself could anchor him to safety. And the blade itself, well, it's not just a tool, is it? In this world, it's a thin, gleaming line between life and death, between purity and chaos. You picture the barber sharpening his copper blade on a rough stone, the sparks flying in the dusk light, and you wonder how many of those sparks are really prayers in disguise. Each cut is a gamble, a moment when the balance might tip, when the gods might lean in just a little too close. You glance at the barber's face, lined and serious, a man carrying the weight of this risk every day. How many times has he slipped? How many curses has he had to pray away, hands sticky with oil and blood? The thought makes your skin crawl, but also, you can't help but admire the quiet courage in it. The razor's curse isn't just an old wives' tale. It's a constant presence, a reminder that every shave, every trim, is a dance with the unseen. The man in the chair breathes out, long and slow, and you watch the barber's shoulders relax a fraction. The cut is small, just a scratch really, but you can tell they're both relieved to see the bleeding stop. The barber dips a cloth in oil, dabs the wound, and mutters something you can't quite hear, probably a protective phrase, or maybe just a quiet thank you to the gods for sparing him this time. The razor glints one last time in the lamplight as the barber sets it down, and you swear you can almost feel the tension loosen in the air, like a taut string finally released. The customer stands, presses a few coins into the barber's palm, and walks away, his step a little faster, a little tighter than before. The wind rustles the linen canopy, and the barber glances at his tools, as if checking they're all still there, blade, amulet, jar of crocodile fat, all in their place, all ready for the next round. And you stand there, feeling the weight of the razor's curse settle into your own bones, a quiet, unseen thread tying you back to a world where one wrong cut could change everything. The night air feels cooler now, almost damp as it rolls in off the river, and you shiver slightly beneath your shawl. The barber stands for a moment, stretching his arms, his right hand flexing gently, his left still tucked in like an afterthought. You notice the customers shifting in their seats, eyes darting between the tools, the amulet, and the temple's looming silhouette. There's a quiet expectation in the air, a weight that isn't quite spoken, but hangs in the space like the faint scent of incense drifting from the temple steps. You glance at the temple itself, its grand, towering walls, the smooth sandstone blocks stacked in a rhythm of precision and faith. The scent of burning myrrh lingers, soft and sharp, and somewhere inside, a priest is chanting in a low, droning tone that seems to ripple through the stone. You feel it in your ribs, a deep vibration that hums in the background like a forgotten lullaby. And then it hits you, the connection between the barbers and the priests. You'd heard whispers before, but now it clicks into place. Barbers weren't just trimming beards for market days, they were keepers of purity. They were the ones who shaved the priests, cleaned their faces and heads, ensuring that not a single hair remained to offend the gods. Imagine the pressure standing before a high-ranking priest, razor in hand, knowing that even a single missed hair could render the man impure, unfit to perform sacred rituals. The gods, after all, demanded perfection. You can almost hear the whispered warning, leave one hair, and you might anger the gods. Historians still argue whether these purification shaves were purely symbolic or if they had practical roots after all. In the sticky heat of Egypt, shaved skin was cooler, less prone to lice, maybe even healthier. But for the priests, it wasn't about comfort. It was about worthiness. A priest with a beard or worse, stray stubble was like an unwashed offering, a mark of disrespect. And the barber? He was the guardian at the gate, the one who made sure the priest was clean enough to stand before the gods. You picture a young barber apprentice nervously preparing for his first temple shave. The elder barber leans in, whispering in a low voice, steady hand. Always the right dot, never the left. The gods watch from above, and they don't forgive mistakes. The apprentice nods, his stomach tight, knowing that one slip could ruin not just his reputation, but the priest's too. The ritual was intense, the priest seated in silence, head bowed, while the barber moved around him like a silent dancer, blade gleaming, oil glistening on the skin. The priest's skin had to be perfectly smooth, polished, like a stone statue, every stray hair hunted down and removed. You imagine the barber's heart pounding with each stroke, praying that the gods would guide his hand. And the tools mattered. The blade had to be sharp, the oil pure, the cloth clean. A dull razor or a nicked blade wasn't just unprofessional. It could taint the ritual itself, infuse the ceremony with impurity. The barbers knew this. They carried the weight of it in every cut, every swipe, every whispered prayer under their breath. The connection between barbers and temples wasn't just practical, it was spiritual. These men were gatekeepers of holiness, the silent hands that kept the priests presentable, pure, and worthy. Without the barbers, the rituals couldn't proceed, the prayers couldn't rise, the gods wouldn't listen. The customer in the chair rises, smoothing his robe, and you can almost see the relief in his shoulders, clean, trimmed, ready to face the world. The barber wipes his blade on a cloth, eyes flickering once toward the temple, as if seeking silent approval. And you feel it too, that sense that every cut, every motion is more than just grooming. It's an act of faith, a way of holding the world together, one smooth, careful stroke at a time. The moon climbs higher, casting pale light over the temple and the stall, and you wonder, how many priests have walked through this very street, freshly shaven by the barber's hand, their skin tingling with oil and anticipation? How many prayers have been whispered by barbers before the blade touches skin, hoping for no slips, no omens, no divine displeasure? The night hums softly, the river whispering in the distance, and you stand there, feeling the echo of the ancient world settle deep into your bones. The air shifts slightly, a breath of warmth from the temple fires drifting across your face as you lean in to watch the next customer take his place. He's younger than the others, his hair still thick and dark, but his eyes heavy with worry. The barber nods politely, dips his blade in oil, and begins to comb through the man's hair, gently lifting sections, as if inspecting more than just growth. There's a pause, a glance exchanged, and the man's voice drops to a near whisper. You can't hear the words, but the barber's nod is slow, almost solemn, as if they've crossed into a different kind of service entirely. It strikes you. This isn't just a haircut. It's a confession booth. The barber listens, and sometimes, just sometimes, he interprets. In a world where dreams could shape destinies and the gods whispered through omens, barbers were more than just men with blades. They were interpreters, quiet seers in their own right, who might offer a word of comfort, a guess at a dream's meaning, or a warning hidden behind a wry smile. The man's voice is low, urgent now, and you catch a word or two. Snake, flood, lost. The barber's hand pauses mid-snip, eyes narrowing, and he murmurs something back, too quiet for you to catch. The man exhales, slumping slightly, as if the weight of the dream has shifted, its meaning handed off to someone else. The barber taps the blade against a clay jar, the sound sharp and final, like a punctuation mark on the end of an invisible sentence. Historians still argue whether barbers were formally recognized as dream interpreters, or if this was just a side effect of their social role. After all, everyone visited the barber eventually. But there are scattered records, half buried in temple scrolls, suggesting that barbers sometimes acted as informal advisors. Who better to offer a quiet word of insight than the man with a razor at your throat? The man who heard everyone's worries, from the farmer with a sick cow to the merchant afraid of a flood ruining his grain. And in a world ruled by omens, where a dream of a snake might mean prosperity for one man and disaster for another, any advice was worth listening to, even if it came between snips of a blade. The barber's stall was a place where the sacred and the mundane blurred. A man might come in for a trim and leave with a warning about his wife's new necklace, or the strange way the Nile's floodwaters smelled this year. The man in the chair lets out a breathy laugh, half relieved, half nervous. The barber smiles a small, knowing curve of the lips and wipes his blade clean, the motion smooth and practiced. You get the sense that this ritual has played out 100 times before, maybe 1,000, each one different yet somehow the same. And the barber? He's both participant and observer, a man who carries other men's fears in the folds of his kilt, who smooths them down with oil and razor and sends them back into the world a little lighter, a little less burdened. It's a strange power, isn't it? To shape not just a man's hair, but his sense of what might be waiting for him tomorrow. The customer rises, slips a few coins into the barber's hand, and nods a gesture that seems to say thank you, and don't tell anyone all at once. The barber accepts the coins with a quiet grace, wiping his hands on a cloth, and glances up at the sky as if checking the time by the stars. The night stretches on, the faint rustle of the river blending with the distant chants from the temple, and you feel the weight of it all settle into your chest. The blades, the dreams, the whispered worries, all woven together in the quiet hum of the barber shop. You glance at the blade in the barber's hand, the slight shimmer of oil on its edge, and you wonder, how many destinies has this man nudged? How many futures has he gently shaped, with a quiet word and a careful cut? The man may have walked in for a shave, but he leaves carrying a story, a warning, maybe even a glimpse of the God's will. The wind shifts, the lamp flickers, and the barber turns back to his tools, ready for the next man's dreams. The lull of the night settles like a warm blanket across the shop, but the undercurrent of whispered chatter never really stops. You shift closer, drawn by the soft voices of the men waiting in line half-murmured tales, secrets shared in low tones, the kind of talk that carries in any place where sharp blades and loose tongues meet. A man jokes about a neighbor's flailing donkey. Another leans in to gossip about a priest's unexpected visit to the fish market. You can't help but smirk some things. It seems never change. The barber's stall is more than a place of grooming. It's a crossroads for information, a hub where stories gather and swirl like river eddies. Each man who sits in the chair leaves something behind: an overheard argument, a whispered complaint, a hint of scandal wrapped in half-smiles. The barber, quiet and efficient, listens to it all, his right hand busy with the blade, his left hovering like a ghost at his side. And oh, does he listen! In a world without written records for the little details of life, the barber's chair is an unofficial archive. Historians still debate whether barbers actively spread gossip. Were they accidental collectors of stories or quiet orchestrators, slipping information to the right ears at the right time? It's hard to say, but you can imagine a barber leaning in just a little too close during a shave, murmuring a warning about a rival's sudden fortune, a merchant's suspicious deal, a priest's waning favor with the gods. A snip here, a whispered word there, and suddenly the entire market is buzzing with rumors. The man in the chair, now broad-shouldered, with a face like sun-baked clay, leans back as the barber trims his hair. You catch fragments of his words: land dispute, uncle's cattle, temple taxes. The barber nods, makes a small noise in his throat, and you see the faintest flicker of a smirk. You wonder how many stories have been traded in this very spot, how many alliances brokered, how many reputations quietly shredded beneath the steady scrape of the razor. And the customers aren't innocent, either. They glance at each other, eyes sharp, ears tilted toward the whispered murmurs. A man scratches his chin thoughtfully. Another leans just a little too close, pretending to inspect a jar of oil while clearly eavesdropping on the latest scandal. The barber's stall isn't just a grooming spot. It's a theater, a chessboard, a place where the smallest flicker of information can ripple outward into the city's tangled web of relationships. The barber finishes the cut with a final, satisfying snip and dabs oil along the man's neck, the scent sharp and slightly floral. He leans in, murmuring a word too quiet for you to catch, and the man nods, lips tight, before slipping a coin into the barber's palm. You wonder what was said. Was it a warning, a piece of advice, or just a joke at another man's expense? You'll never know, but you feel the tension in the air, the unspoken knowledge that every visit to the barber is a risk, a moment when your secrets might become someone else's entertainment. You glance at the barber's hands, steady, skilled, but never innocent. There's power in those fingers, and not just in the way they wield a blade. A whisper here, a glance there, and a man's fortune could rise or fall before the next customer even takes a seat. The thought makes you shiver slightly, imagining how many lives have been quietly nudged in this little stall. How many men have walked away with a smoother beard and a thorn in their side. The air hums, a low murmur of voices, the scent of oil and sweat curling around you, and you feel the pulse of the ancient city in this small, dusty stall, a place where hair falls to the floor, but words hang in the air, sharp as any blade. The night deepens, the stars sharpening overhead like chips of flint scattered across the sky. The barber's tools gleam faintly in the dim light blade, comb, oil jar, cloth each resting in its place like a little shrine to precision. You lean in slightly, watching as the next customer approaches, a man with a heavy brow and tired eyes. His beard is patchy, a bit scraggly, as if he's been too busy or too anxious to bother with it. He sits, exhales sharply, and you feel the weight of something unsaid settling around the stall. The barber doesn't speak. He lifts the man's chin, studies the uneven growth, and reaches for the blade. And suddenly, as the razor scrapes across the skin, you feel it. This isn't just a shave. There's something else here, something older, heavier. The air feels tighter, like a cord pulled taut. You glance at the man's hair falling to the floor, the small curls and clippings scattering like tiny whispers. And then it hits you. In ancient Egypt, cutting hair wasn't always just about looks. Some believed that hair carried a piece of the soul, a fragment of the self. To cut it away was to release something, to sever a connection, to shed a piece of identity, or maybe even to invite change. A barber's blade could shape your face, sure, but it could also shape your fate. You remember reading that Egyptians sometimes kept locks of hair from loved ones braided, perfumed, stored in little boxes like sacred objects. Hair wasn't just vanity. It was memory. It was protection. Some even believed it could be used in magic woven into amulets, buried with the dead, or burned as an offering to the gods. The hair falling at your feet now feels heavier somehow, like it's carrying invisible threads of history and hope. Historians still argue whether this connection between hair and soul was a widespread belief or more of a fringe idea whispered in back alleys and temple corridors. But the fear lingers, doesn't it? The quiet worry that cutting your hair might somehow cut away a piece of your essence, leaving you vulnerable. Please, don't cut the back my mother's blessing is braided in there. Or maybe just a little off the sides. My lover stroked my hair last night, and I want her to remember the feel of it. You imagine the barber nodding, silently honoring these requests, even as the blade glides through hair like a knife through time. There's also the darker side. Rumors half-whispered, always with a nervous glance of hair being stolen for curses, spells, love potions. You picture a barber sweeping up the clippings at the end of the day, his hand hesitating over a particularly long, dark lock. Does he toss it into the dust, or does he tuck it away just in case? Maybe sell it to someone in the market who knows a thing or two about love charms and revenge. The man in the chair shifts uneasy as the blade glides down his cheek. You notice a small scar at his jawline, old, faded, a whisper of some past wound. The barber works carefully around it, as if scars are stories to be respected, not erased. You wonder what stories have been whispered in this chair, what tears have been blinked away, what hopes have been quietly folded into the shape of a beard. The last stroke of the blade is soft, almost reverent. The barber sets it down, dabs a bit of oil onto the man's skin, and offers a quiet nod. The man touches his face tentatively, as if feeling for something more than smoothness, and you see the barest flicker of relief, or maybe just the faint hope that he's left a burden behind in those fallen strands. The clippings drift to the floor, curling softly, a silent testament to the quiet, invisible power of a barber's blade. The air has cooled, the market's noises fading into the background hum of the Nile, but inside the barber's stall, a quiet tension lingers. The scent of oil and sweat, the faint glint of copper, the soft whisper of a blade against skin, it all feels steady, rhythmic, until it's not. You glance over just as a new customer sits down, a man with a stiff posture and a nervous smile. The barber nods politely, dips the razor into oil, and begins to work, but something feels off. Maybe it's the way the man flinches as the blade nears his cheek, or the way the barber's fingers seem a little too tight on the handle, a bead of sweat glistening at his temple. And then it happens, just a slip, barely more than a twitch of the wrist, but enough. The blade catches, the man gasps, and a thin line of blood blossoms across his skin. It's shallow, not much more than a scratch, but in this world, A cut from a barber's blade carries more than just the sting of copper against flesh. You feel the collective inhale, the tension snapping taut like a bowstring. The barber's hands freeze. The customer's eyes widen, darting down to the streak of red. A few men shift uncomfortably in their seats, glancing sideways at each other, as if waiting for someone to say what no one wants to voice. A cut like that, it's an omen. Historians still argue whether a barber's accidental cut was seen as a bad omen, universally or just in specific religious contexts. Was it always a sign of divine disfavor, or only when the customer was someone of high status, like a priest or a noble? No one agrees for sure, but you can feel it in the air. This is not a small thing. The barber moves quickly now, pressing a cloth to the wound, whispering something low, maybe an apology, maybe a prayer. He dips his fingers in a small pot of resin, the scent sharp and bitter, and dabs it onto the cut. The customer's face tightens, but he stays silent, lips thin and pressed together, as if speaking might make the curse real. You wonder about all the times a small slip like this might have spiraled into disaster. A man who walked away from a barber's stall with a cut on his neck, only to fall ill days later. Was it infection? Or was it the god's punishment, a sign that the man had offended some unseen force? Maybe it wasn't the barber's fault at all. Maybe the customer's own sins had brought it upon him, and the blade was just the messenger. The barber's face is tight now, his jaw clenched, his right hand flexing as if to shake off the weight of the mistake. His left stays hidden, folded tight against his side like a child punished into silence. You can almost hear the thoughts racing through his mind. Was it the wrong oil? Did I offend the gods? Or was my hand cursed by that dream last night? The customers murmur, low and nervous. One man whispers something about a priest's son who died after a cut like that. Another shakes his head sharply, as if to ward off the thought. A third mutters that the barber should burn a sprig of thyme tonight, just in case, and maybe sleep facing away from the Nile. The cut itself is small, drying already, the resin sealing it over. The man rises, leaving a coin that feels heavier than it should, as if payment alone could smooth over the ripple that's just spread through the air. You feel a shiver creep up your spine. This isn't just superstition, it's survival. A bad cut in this world is more than a nick. It's a warning, a crack in the fragile balance between life and whatever waits in the unseen spaces. You imagine the barber that night, sitting alone in his small room, running his fingers over the blade, wondering if the curse is in the steel or in himself. The breeze stirs, and the murmur of the market resumes, but you know it's not quite the same. The blade glints in the fading light, a thin, sharp line between the living and the unlucky, and the barber's hands hover, steady but not quite at ease. The night air has thickened, heavy with the scent of oil lamps and river mud, but there's a subtle shift in the atmosphere as a new figure approaches the barber's stall. You blink, surprised, because this time it's not a broad-shouldered man or a weary priest. It's a woman. She steps lightly, her linen robe tucked high at the waist, arms bare, wrists adorned with thin bronze bangles that catch the faint lamplight. Her gaze is steady, and her mouth tilts just slightly at the corner, as if daring anyone to question her presence. The other customers glance up, their conversations faltering. One man looks as though he might say something, but the barber's sharp glance silences him. The stall grows quieter, the only sound the faint clink of the woman's bracelets and the soft, deliberate steps she takes toward the tools laid out in neat order. You feel the weight of it, the question hanging in the air. A woman? Here? Historians still argue whether women in ancient Egypt ever practiced as barbers, or if this was purely the domain of men. There are whisper stories carved into stone, hints in old papyri that some women may have learned the trade in secret, perhaps as widows taking over a husband's stall or as healers blending barbering with folk medicine. But the records are fragmentary, the evidence thin, leaving room for debates that drift on like the Nile's mist. You watch as she reaches for the blade, not the large razor used for shaving beards, but a smaller curved blade, almost like a crescent moon. Her fingers curl around the handle with a practiced ease that suggests this isn't her first time holding it. The men shift uncomfortably, some pretending to inspect jars of oil, others staring openly, their expressions a mix of curiosity, suspicion, and maybe a flicker of fear. You wonder what she's doing here. Is she the barber's assistant? His daughter? His widow, stepping in to keep the business alive? Or is she something else entirely, an independent barber in her own right? A woman who's defied the norms and carved out a place in a world of men and blades? The barber watches her, his face unreadable, but his hands are still, resting lightly on the cloth laid across his lap. There's no correction, no protest, just the quiet acceptance of her presence, as if acknowledging a fact that others might pretend not to see. The woman lifts a small jar, unscrews the lid, and dabs a bit of oil onto the blade. The scent of lotus fills the air, light and sharp, a contrast to the heavier scents that have clung to the stall all evening. Her movements are deliberate, each stroke of the cloth across the blade measured and sure. You can't help but wonder what it was like for a woman in this role. Did she face constant suspicion? Whispers that she was cursed, unclean, a danger to customers' fortunes? Or did some men seek her out in secret, trusting her skill with a blade or her knowledge of herbs more than the awkward hands of a young, untested male barber? The debate lingers. Were women ever truly accepted as barbers, or were they seen as something else entirely, midwives, healers, perhaps even witches, in the eyes of the superstitious? You imagine the stories whispered in dark corners of the market. She uses her left hand, she knows charms, she can see things in the oil, and yet here she is, calm and composed, the blade in her hand glinting softly under the flickering lamp. The air feels tight, expectant. The customers watch her, but no one moves, no one speaks. The only sound is the soft click of the blade tapping against the oil jar, a rhythmic beat like a slow, measured pulse. You feel the weight of her gaze, steady and unflinching, as if she's daring the world to challenge her right to stand here in the barber's stall with the blade in her hand. And in that moment it doesn't matter what the official records say, or whether historians agree. She's here, she's working, she's cutting, trimming, shaping, and the gods haven't struck her down yet. You wonder how many more like her there were, hidden in plain sight, quietly reshaping the edges of a world that insisted they didn't belong. The blade flashes once in the dim light, and the tension in the air settles, not entirely, but enough. The woman's hands are steady, and the customers shift back in their seats, the moment of uncertainty slipping quietly into the night. The moonlight spills across the sand in silvery ripples as the woman's blade catches a glint of it, and for a heartbeat the world feels suspended. Then the spell breaks. The next customer approaches, a wiry, sun-darkened man with a nervous glance flicked toward the blade and, more pointedly, the woman's hands. You sense it in the subtle shift of his shoulders, the way his eyes dart sideways, as if hoping the barber himself might step in. But no one does. The man sits, hesitant, and the woman moves around him, her steps measured, her touch light but firm as she tilts his head. The others watch, some with narrowed eyes, and a few with something closer to pity. The air crackles with a tension that goes beyond gender or skill. There's something deeper here. You notice the flicker of superstition in the man's gaze, and it's not just because a woman holds the blade. His eyes keep straying to the woman's left hand. It rests near her waist, fingers curled loosely, but it might as well be glowing with an invisible sign: danger. The left hand, the sinister one, the cursed one, the wrong one. You remember the temple warnings, the careful teachings about the balance of mat. The right hand brings order, the left brings chaos. And here, in this small, flickering stall, that fear feels alive. Historians still argue whether left-handed barbers were shunned outright or simply tolerated with a kind of wary distance. But the stories that have survived hint at a quiet but crushing stigma. A barber known to favor his left hand might find customers dwindling, whispers spreading like smoke. He's unlucky. His hands bring misfortune. Better to avoid him. You can almost feel the weight of that fear in the air now, the way the man stiffens under the blade, his breath held tight in his chest. The woman works carefully, her right hand steady as she lifts the blade, but the man's gaze keeps flicking to the left, as if it might twitch at any moment, slip into motion, and bring some unseen doom upon him. And it wasn't just talk. The social penalties for a left-handed barber could be sharp, even cruel. He's left-handed. My cousin's neighbor's nephew got a cut from him, and his harvest failed that year. Coincidence? You imagine the isolation, how a left-handed barber might stand in the stall, watching the steady stream of customers drift toward his right-handed rivals, feeling the silent wall grow thicker with every passing day. And yet, how many of them secretly practiced in the dark, quietly honing their skills with the left, just in case their right hand failed them one day? Or worse, what if a barber's right hand did fail, perhaps from injury or illness? Imagine the dread that would bloom then, the fear of being seen using the wrong hand, of having no choice but to risk the superstitions. You glance back at the woman. Her left hand hovers, steady but restrained, as if she knows all too well the risks of letting it move too freely. You wonder if she's been accused before, whispered about, maybe even shunned. Or perhaps she's learned to hide her skill, practicing in the quiet hours after dark, the blade glinting under the stars as she teaches. Her left hand the delicate balance of shaving a man's throat without drawing blood. The man in the chair shifts slightly, and you see the flicker of tension in his jaw. The woman finishes the cut, wipes the blade, and steps back. The man stands quickly, a bit too quickly, drops his coins on the stool, and leaves without a word. The air feels lighter, just slightly, as if the moment has passed without incident. But the other men exchange glances, small, subtle, a silent, "Did you see that?" And beneath it all the old fear hums, soft but persistent. The left hand is dangerous. The left hand is unlucky. The woman turns, her expression calm, unreadable. Her left hand flexes once at her side, then stills again. The blade gleams in her right, sharp and waiting. And the night rolls on, the whispers rising and falling like the Nile's endless current. The stall hums quietly in the late night, the flow of customers slower now, the air heavy with the weight of whispered stories and unspoken rules. But as you linger at the edge, you hear a different kind of tale, one that feels like a ripple across time, tugging at the fabric of the moment. A man leans in close to the barber, voice low, the words slipping through the air like the hiss of sand across stone. Did you hear? That painter in the East Quarter, left-handed. They say he painted the gods with his wrong hand and still lived to tell the tale. You tilt your head, curiosity piqued. Left-handed painters? You glance at the barber's quiet hands, the gleaming blade, and wonder if the taboo of the left hand ever truly held all the power people claimed. Historians still debate whether left-handedness was universally shunned in ancient Egypt, or whether, in some rare cases, it was quietly tolerated, perhaps even seen as a mark of genius in certain circles. After all, not everyone who worked with their hands could be condemned outright. There are whispers of left-handed artists, sculptors, even scribes, those who held their brushes or chisels or reeds in the wrong hand, yet produced works so breathtaking that even the gods must have paused to admire them. You think of the painter, perhaps crouched in the corner of a tomb, his brush gripped in his left hand, crafting scenes of boats on the Nile, of offerings laid before Osiris, of the goddess Hathor cupping her hands around the sun. Did the overseer notice? Did the high priest care? Or did they look at the finished work, the flawless lines and vivid pigments, and decide it was better to let that small detail slide, as long as the images pleased the gods? The man in the barber's chair chuckles quietly, shaking his head. A left-handed man painting the gods. It's tempting fate, isn't it? The barber gives a small smile, a knowing tilt of the head, and you sense the story has made its rounds more than once tonight. Then another voice pipes up, an older man, his back stooped but his eyes sharp. And don't forget the Pharaoh's cousin, the one who wrote poetry with his left hand. They say his verses were so beautiful, the priests had to copy them by candlelight, even though everyone knew he was born under the wrong star. You feel a quiet thrill run through the air, a sense that maybe, just maybe, the world wasn't quite as rigid as it seemed. There were cracks in the system, little spaces where left-handedness wasn't an immediate curse, but a quirk, a strange mark of talent or eccentricity. Rare, yes, risky, always, but possible. The barber's blade pauses mid-air, the edge gleaming in the low light. You watch his hands, both of them, and wonder how many lefties were forced to retrain themselves, hiding their true instincts, twisting their natural gifts into a shape the world would accept. Or perhaps some, like the painter or the poet, simply didn't care, daring the world to punish them and winning their place through sheer brilliance. It makes you think of all the stories that have been lost, the names erased, the whispers silenced, the left-handed scribes and barbers and artists who might have reshaped the world if only their hands hadn't betrayed them. You feel a quiet, aching respect for those who dared to let the wrong hand lead, knowing they risked more than just bad luck, they risked everything. The night wind stirs and the air feels charged, as if the very stones beneath your feet remember the weight of those forgotten hands. The barber wipes his blade, his expression unreadable, and you wonder, is he remembering someone? A brother, a friend, a teacher who once tried to guide the blade with the left and paid the price? The breeze hums through the stall, carrying the quiet, unspoken truth. Not every left-handed person was feared. Some were simply too skilled to be ignored. And maybe, just maybe, the barber himself has felt that pull, the quiet temptation to shift the blade just once and let the left hand try. Absolutely. Let's keep flowing into section 17. The hours stretch thin as the night deepens, and you notice the quiet dance of competition playing out in the shadows. Two men hover near the barber's stall, their eyes sharp, their shoulders tight. One shifts from foot to foot, hands clenched, while the other leans casually against a pillar, arms folded, watching with the kind of stillness that hums with quiet calculation. You recognize them now, other barbers, rival blades waiting in the wings, their own stalls tucked around corners and down narrow streets. The barber glances up briefly, his face unreadable, but you sense it, the tension, the unspoken knowledge that in this world, even the art of trimming beards and smoothing brows is a battleground. Barbers in ancient Egypt weren't just quiet craftsmen. They were competitors in a market where reputation was everything, and secrets were currency. The man who cut too close, who whispered the wrong gossip, who slipped with the blade even once, could find his clients trickling away like water through cracked clay. And when the stakes are that high, sabotage isn't just a possibility, it's a whispered reality. You imagine the rivalry small, sharp feuds that simmered in the heat of the day and cooled into silent, seething grudges by night. A barber might accidentally let a rumor slip. I heard his last customer got a fever after the shave. Must have been the wrong oil, or maybe bad luck. Or a tool might go missing funny. I could have sworn I left that blade on the shelf. Or worse, a vial of oil replaced with something spoiled. A deliberate act designed to ruin a competitor's reputation with one unlucky customer. Historians still argue whether these rivalries were personal grudges or part of a broader competition for favor from the powerful priests, nobles, or even the palace itself. A well-placed cut, a trusted hand, could open doors to lucrative clients. The pharaoh's court didn't just let anyone near their skin with a blade, after all. You glance at the barber's amulet, the thin strip of leather worn soft from years of quiet prayers, and wonder how many times he's had to fend off rivals, not with fists, but with a sharper edge, skill, steadiness, and the subtle art of keeping secrets. Maybe he's been the target of whispers himself. His left hand twitched, didn't it? I heard he cut a priest once, and they had to burn incense for a week to clear the curse. The rivals across the way exchange a glance, a tilt of the chin, a flicker of a smirk that says, "Let's see how long he keeps his clients tonight." Asterisk the barber, for his part, keeps his eyes low, the copper blade flashing in the lamplight, his motion smooth, unbothered, or at least pretending to be. It's a quiet war, this world of barbers, each man guarding his tools, his charms, his reputation. You imagine the young apprentices watching from the edges, learning not just how to angle a blade, but how to protect their future, whom to trust, when to speak, when to stay silent. The man in the chair tilts his head back, exposing his throat, and you feel the tension hum in the air like a taut bowstring. The barber's hands are steady, but you wonder, has he ever felt the flicker of doubt, the fear that a rival might have slipped something into the oil jar, or whispered a curse into the stall after dark, the blade glides smoothly, and the customer exhales in relief. But the rivals still hover, their presence a quiet weight in the space. You realize this isn't just about haircuts, it's about survival. Every snip, every stroke, every satisfied customer is a small victory in an ongoing, invisible war. The breeze stirs the linen canopy, and for a moment the air feels charged, as if the gods themselves are watching, waiting to see who will slip first, who will fall. The barber wipes his blade, tucks it away, and glances up just briefly, just enough to let the rivals know he sees them. The smile that tugs at the corner of his mouth is small, but it says everything. Not tonight. The quiet rivalry fades into the background as the night deepens. The market now little more than a whisper of movement in the dark. But something shifts as you hear a low chant drift from the temple, its rhythm slow and deliberate. The sound seems to tug at the barber's stall, as if drawing it into the current of something older, deeper, and far more sacred. You turn your head and catch sight of a priest walking slowly from the temple gates, his white robes glowing faintly in the lamplight. Behind him, 2 attendants carry a small tray, upon which rests a bundle wrapped in linen hair, you realize, tightly braided and perfumed, carefully laid out as if it were an offering. It dawns on you then. Hair itself wasn't just something to be cut and discarded. In this world it had meaning beyond the aesthetic. Offerings of hair, beard trimmings, and even false wigs were given to the gods, laid at the feet of statues, placed at temple altars, or buried in tombs. The idea of divine haircuts feels strange to your modern mind, but here, it's woven into the fabric of belief, hair as a gift, a symbol of devotion, a piece of oneself handed over to the divine. The barber steps aside, eyes lowered in quiet respect, as the priest approaches. The tray of hair is set before a small altar near the barber's stall. Yes, here, in the very space where blades flash and oil shimmers, the line between the sacred and the ordinary blurring like smoke in the night air. Historians still debate whether these offerings were symbolic acts of purification, expressions of gratitude, or perhaps pleas for favor, a good harvest, a safe childbirth, protection from illness. Some believe they were meant to appease the gods, to offer a tangible piece of oneself as a token of humility and faith. Others argue it was a more practical matter. Hair, in a world of limited resources, was simply too personal to discard carelessly, and so it became sacred by default. You glance at the barber's tools, again those glinting blades, the pots of oil, the little amulet tied to the razor, and you feel the weight of it all. Every cut, every lock of hair is more than just a moment of grooming. It's a thread in the great tapestry of belief, a piece of the cosmic balance that binds gods and mortals together. The priest speaks softly, a chant in a language that feels half familiar, half forgotten, and you catch a few words matte, offering purity. The hair, laid so carefully on the tray, glows faintly in the lamplight, its strands gleaming like river reeds. The barber watches, his expression unreadable, but you wonder what he's thinking. Does he ever feel the weight of these rituals, the sense that his work, simple, careful, precise, feeds into something much larger than himself? Does he believe that the hair he cuts could sway a god's favor, that the offerings placed at the temple might tip the scales of fate? And what about the false wigs? You remember reading that some Egyptians, especially nobles and priests, wore elaborate wigs made from human hair, wool, or even plant fiber, symbols of status, but also of transformation. Imagine a man shaving his head in the barber's stall, leaving behind a part of himself only to don a new identity in the form of a carefully crafted wig. The hair cut away wasn't lost. It was repurposed, offered, or worn by someone else. The breeze stirs, the chant fades, and the priest steps back, leaving the bundle of hair resting quietly on the altar. The barber inclines his head, a small gesture of respect, before turning back to his tools. The customer waiting in the chair watches, wide-eyed, as if realizing for the first time that a haircut here is more than just a trim. It's a link in a chain that stretches from the mundane to the divine. You feel the weight of that, too, the sense that every snip of the blade, every lock of hair that falls to the floor, carries a quiet echo of devotion. The gods, after all, are always watching, and sometimes even the smallest gesture, a strand of hair, a polished razor, a whispered prayer can ripple through the cosmos in ways no one fully understands. The night hums softly, the scent of myrrh and oil thick in the air, and the barber lifts his blade once more, the lamplight catching its edge in a flash of copper and shadow. The air in the barber's stall feels thicker now, as if it's soaked in the weight of the night's stories, secrets whispered, beards shaped, offerings laid at the god's feet. You watch as the barber, quiet and composed, glances at a boy standing nearby, no more than 12 or 13. The boy's linen tunic is smudged with oil, a smear of what might be resin darkening his fingers. His eyes are wide, darting between the barber's blade and the customer's. His breath held tight in his chest as if waiting for permission to move. This, you realize, is an apprentice, a boy on the brink of learning the craft, standing at the threshold of a world where sharp blades and sharper glances shape not just hair, but destinies. The barber gestures with a small nod, and the boy steps forward, hands trembling as he lifts a jar of oil and sets it carefully beside the razor. The blade gleams, and you can almost hear the lessons unspoken in the barber's quiet gaze. Asterisk watch. Listen. Never let your left hand lead. Never slip. Never forget that a man's pride and a god's favor can both rest on the sharpness of your blade. The apprentice hovers like a shadow, absorbing the rhythm of the trade, the soft scrape of the blade, the faint snip of scissors, the way the barber's fingers test the skin for heat, for tension, for the telltale signs of a man who's holding his breath a little too tightly. It's not just technique the boy is learning. It's a whole language of movement, a silent dance of trust and precision. Historians still debate how barbers were trained in ancient Egypt. Was it a formal system, passed down in strict apprenticeship, or a looser tradition, learned by watching and mimicking? The records are thin, fragmentary, but the boy's posture tells you everything. This is an education of the body, of the hands, of the senses, not one of scrolls and scribes. And the training isn't gentle. You imagine the boy fumbling a jar, dropping a blade, watching as customers' eyes narrow in quiet judgment. A slip here could mean more than a sharp word. It could mean the loss of clients, the loss of trust, the whisper of curses following you home at night. The apprentice's hands hover close to his sides, his left tucked in tight, as if he's been told 1,000 times. No, not that one. The left is for shadows. The right is for life. You glance at the floor, at the fine dusting of hair and the faint smudge of oil, and wonder how many apprentices have stood in that exact spot, heart racing, palms sweaty, learning how to hold a blade without letting it tremble. Did they practice on scraps of leather? Did they learn on the heads of slaves or the poor whose lives were deemed expendable enough to risk a shaky hand? And then you remember the mummies. Some apprentices, it said, practiced on the dead, shaving the heads of the newly departed before embalming, learning the contours of the face in a place where no cry of pain could shatter their focus. You shiver at the thought, a boy standing in a darkened chamber, the air heavy with resin and death, gliding a blade across cold skin, whispering a prayer that he'll never slip when it really matters. The apprentice glances at the barber, who gives a single nod barely perceptible, but enough. The boy lifts a comb, hesitates for a breath, then runs it through a customer's hair, slow, careful, the way a man tests a river current before stepping in. The customer watches him in the mirror of polished bronze, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth, as if remembering his own first steps into the world of blades and oils. The barber's eyes flicker, sharp but not unkind, and you feel it, the weight of tradition, the unbroken chain of knowledge passed from hand to hand, right hand to right hand, down through the centuries. The boy's hands tremble slightly, but they are steady enough. And in that quiet you hear the hum of the Nile outside, the murmur of prayers, the soft, eternal rhythm of learning. The apprentice takes a small step back, his chest rising with a quiet, hopeful breath, and you sense it, he'll be back tomorrow dot, and the day after. And the day after that, learning the feel of the blade, the weight of trust, the ancient, unspoken rules of a trade where one slip can ripple through a man's life like a curse or a blessing. The night has deepened into its quietest hours, and the air feels heavy, dense with the scents of oil, smoke, and the faint sweetness of the Nile drifting in from the riverbank. The market's hum has faded into a soft, distant hush, leaving the barber's stall a small, flickering pocket of light in the vast, dark world. You stand in the quiet, watching as the barber turns to his final task of the night, a task older and more sacred than any simple shave or haircut. A man approaches, his face lined with age, his back slightly stooped. His robes are plain, but the weight he carries is heavy. In his hands, a bundle wrapped in linen, and you realize this isn't just a customer dot. This is a body. The barber sets down his blade gently, wiping it clean with a cloth that feels heavier with history than with oil. He moves with slow, deliberate grace, as if the air itself is thicker around him, the moment heavier than the others. This is the final shave, the preparation for the afterlife. The linen is unwrapped carefully, reverently, revealing a face pale and still. The features are soft now, the lines of worry smoothed by death's quiet hand. The barber leans in, dips his fingers into a small jar of oil, and begins to smooth it across the man's skin, whispering words you can barely catch. They're not for you. They're not even for the men standing nearby. They're for the gods. This is more than a ritual. It's an offering, a final act of respect. In ancient Egypt, the body had to be pure, cleansed, shaven, before the soul could journey to the afterlife. A single missed hair, a blemish left untended, could offend the gods, disrupt the delicate balance of mat, and risk the soul's safe passage. The barber's blade isn't just shaping the man's face, it's shaping his eternity. You watch, heart tight, as the barber tilts the head gently, the copper blade catching the soft light. The hair comes away in thin curls, falling onto the linen like dark whispers. The barber's hands are steady, the motion rhythmic, almost like a lullaby in the dark. Historians still argue whether this final shave was always performed by a barber or whether, in some cases, it was the embalmers themselves who handled it. The records are sparse, but here, in this quiet, it feels certain. The barber is the last to touch the man's face, the last to ensure he is clean, presentable, ready for whatever waits beyond the veil. The air is thick with the scent of resin and oil now, the faint sweetness of lotus and the sharper tang of copper. You watch the barber's hands, right hand steady, left hand folded against his waist, barely moving. Even now, even in this most sacred task, the left hand is restrained, as if the very act of shaving a man for the gods must be done in perfect order, without chaos, without error. The barber hums softly under his breath, a tune that sounds like an old prayer, something passed down from teacher to student, from father to son, across the centuries. The sound weaves through the stall, a soft, steady rhythm, as the last strands of hair fall away, as the man's face is wiped clean, anointed with oil, wrapped in linen, and prepared for the long, silent journey ahead. The barber steps back, his tools resting on the cloth like sacred relics. The other men bow their heads, a moment of quiet reverence shared between them. The customer knows, the man, the soul has been prepared. His final shave is complete. You feel a hush settle over the stall, a sense of completion, of a cycle closed. The barber's hands are still now, resting in his lap, and his gaze drifts toward the river, where the Nile flows dark and steady, as it always has. You breathe in deeply, the air thick with oil, incense, and the quiet, powerful weight of tradition. The barber stands, stretches his back, and begins to pack away his tools. The night is almost done, the last task finished. You step back from the stall, the faint sounds of the market fading completely, leaving only the rustle of linen, the quiet click of a blade being folded, and the soft, eternal hum of the river. The stall sits quiet now, the oil lamps burning low, casting long, soft shadows that dance across the packed earth. The barber's tools are wrapped in cloth, each blade wiped clean, each jar sealed, the little amulet tucked away as if even it is tired from the long night's work. The apprentice has drifted off somewhere, probably curled in a corner, the scent of resin and oil still clinging to his hair. You stand in the hush, feeling the weight of it all, the stories, the fears, the slow, steady rhythm of a life shaped by blades and whispers. The breeze stirs the linen canopy, gentle now, a soft sigh against the stillness. You hear the faint lap of the river, the rustle of reeds, the distant call of a night bird. Your eyes close, and for a moment you're there, the copper blade catching the flicker of light, the smell of lotus and myrrh curling around you, the soft scrape of hair falling onto cloth. The stories linger, the fear of a slip, the quiet trust of a customer, the prayer in every cut. The left hand hidden, the right hand steady, the dance of precision that threads through the centuries, binding one life to the next. And as you breathe in the cool night air, you feel it, the weight of tradition, yes, but also the quiet resilience of those who hold the blade, who listen, who shape not just hair, but moments. The Nile hums in the distance, the stars burn steady, and the world drifts toward sleep. Rest easy now, my friend. Let the night cradle you in its slow, gentle rhythm. Sweet dreams.